And we are back for prepping for winter with the Forsaken sample chapter. So, Aeron has been captured by Euron and has been forced to undergo experiences very similar to Bran, Arya, and Dany. If the parallels hold, in all likelihood we are looking at an attempt to awaken Aeron's telepathic gift. Euron also seems quite concerned with crushing Aeron's morale and having him pray to him, which I speculate is an effort to get Aeron to use his telepathic gift. Aeron, though, is not alone in receiving Euron's abuse. Priests and warlocks have also been captured and tortured by Euron. Most recently, we find Aeron and his companions have been released from their dungeon and are now facing Euron's minions. And now let's conclude this chapter. "Have your gods been good to you in the dark?" asked Left Hand Lucas Codd. One of the warlocks snarled some answer in his ugly eastern tongue. "I curse you all," Aeron said. So Left Hand Lucas Codd, like Euron, mocks the religions of the priests and the warlocks, and a warlock snarls in anger. Now again I'd like to stress that the warlocks are not religious as far as we know. They likely aspire to join a network of undying for their afterlife. So Codd's insult would likely fall flat on a warlock, yet this one seems particularly angry as Aeron. We also have no proof that the warlocks even speak the common tongue. Pyat Pri, for example, spoke to Dany in Dothraki. Even if we suppose the warlock did speak the common tongue, why would he respond in his native tongue? It makes no sense. Last time I noted that the warlocks reacted whenever Aeron prayed, so I do wonder if this warlock is now telepathically linked with Aeron. Is the snarl actually Aeron's doing? "Your curses have no power here, priest," said Left Hand Lucas Codd. "The Crow's Eye has fed your drowned god well, and he has grown fat with sacrifice. Words are wind, but blood is power. We have given thousands to the sea, and he has given us victories." So Lucas Codd, in a bit of contradiction, speaks of Euron feeding Aeron's drowned god in sacrifice. And yet Codd just mocked religion, and Euron is an atheist. The drowned god is clearly Aeron's, and not Codd's or Euron's. So why on earth feed a god that doesn't exist? Now Codd may be simply taunting Aeron, but he says something interesting. Words are wind, but blood is power. The latter half, of course, recalls Melisandre and her belief that there's power in king's blood, and perhaps the concept of blood magic. This would make one think that perhaps something magical might be brewing. But let's also remember that the phrase words are wind has a double meaning. Yes, most often it means that words are meaningless, but in its first use, it was in response to Davos asking where he would find the wind to blow Stannis to the throne. Words, if they actually affect belief, are definitely power. After all, Falia Flower's words affected Aeron's morale more than the torture. And this all gets back to Varys' famous discussion of power. Power resides where men believe it resides, no more, no less. So there probably isn't any power in blood, and this is true whether we're talking about magic or the divine right of kings. But there may be power in the belief that there's power in blood. But whose belief is Euron feeding into with all of these sacrifices? He's an atheist. Is it the Ironborn's belief? Is it Aeron's belief? Now, setting all of this talk aside, I will say there is some utility to blood for seafarers. Blood is useful as chum. Krakens have been spotted in the Arianne chapter near the Broken Arm, so perhaps Euron is trying to attract some krakens.
"Count yourself blessed, Damphair," said Stonehand. "We are going back to the sea. The red wine fleet creeps towards us. The winds have been against them rounding Dorne, but they're finally near enough to have emboldened the old women in Old Town. So now Leighton Hightower's sons move down the Whispering Sound in hopes of catching us in the rear."
So it's a bit odd that Stonehand knows that Aeron desperately wants to get to the ocean. Then again, perhaps all drowned priests crave the ocean. But it's extremely odd that Stonehand knows where the Red Wine Fleet is and their wind conditions. On top of this, he seems to know the Hightower's secret movements. Now, I'm not certain how he knows all of this. Perhaps an informant is sending ravens to the Isle of Pigs, or perhaps someone has access to a glass candle or some other supernatural way to see across the world. Finding out that the Red Wine Fleet is approaching slowly actually tells us quite a bit about timing. In Samwell 5: A Feast for Crows, the Ironborn had conquered various spots around the Arbor, including the Isle of Pigs. But in that chapter, the Red Wine fleet hadn't even left Dragonstone and Storm's End yet, or at least the captain of the Huntress wasn't aware of it. We also know that as of the last chapter of A Dance with Dragons, that is, the first day of winter, the Red Wine fleet had not yet arrived. This all means that the scene on the Isle of Pigs with Aeron is actually happening months after the Ironborn first conquered the island. This means that Baelor Hightower has probably completed building his galleys, and Garth Hightower has probably completed his training of recruits, and Gunther Hightower may have even successfully gotten his cell sails from Lyce and made it back. This also means that months have passed for Sam Tarley, and he may have gotten some studying done, and may even know how to use that glass candle. There's at least 3 point-of-view characters at the Battle of Fire, and maybe 4 if Quentyn is alive. And there's at least 2 point-of-view characters at the Battle of Ice, and maybe 3 if Bran's skin changes a raven. Sam could be another perspective on these events, other than Aeron. All of this time passing also means that the execution of the lords and ladies of the Isle of Pigs was probably not due to them threatening the Ironborn. They were prisoners for months, but were only recently executed. This lie makes me question if Euron lied about the warlocks threatening him. Now it should be noted that in this coming battle, the Hightower ships are coming from one direction, and the Red Wine fleet is coming from the other. And the fleets are trapped in a channel between the mainland and an island. I can't help but think about how similar this is to Victarion's defeat at Fair Isle. Of course, the battle at Fair Isle is where the Ironborn fleet was crushed, and where Aeron's ship, the Golden Storm, went down, and where Aeron had a near-death experience and was reborn as a religious man. Although the channel between the arbor is wider, the fleets are larger as well. It seems Euron is intentionally having history repeat itself. Now, interestingly, around this same moment over in Slaver's Bay, Victarion is haunted by Fair Isle when approaching the Isle of Yaros in Slaver's Bay. He even asks himself, what would the Crow's Eye do? Well, we're going to find out exactly what the Crow's Eye is going to do.
"You know what it's like to be caught in the rear, don't you?"
said the Red Oarsman, laughing. "Take them to the ships," Torwald Browntooth commanded. And so Aeron Damphair returned to the Salt Sea. A dozen longships were drawn up at the wharf below the castle, and twice as many beached along the strand. Familiar banners streamed from their mast. The Greyjoy Kraken, the Bloody Moon of Winch, the War Horn of the Good Brothers. But from their sterns flew a flag the priest had never seen before, a red eye with a black pupil, beneath an iron crown supported by 2 crows. So the Red Oarsman also seems to know some information he shouldn't. Euron has apparently told him that he molested Aeron. Now, of course, molesting children is not exactly something people normally brag about, but Euron is apparently more interested in humiliating Aeron than preserving his own reputation. Now, as I noted before, there were a dozen captains feasting at the Isle of Pigs, an allusion to the 12 apostles at the Last Supper, and corresponding with these 12 captains are 12 longships at the wharf, and then there's another 24 or so along the strand. Now, the only 2 houses we hear about are Winch and Goodbrother. Lord Winch is described as a weakling who bent the knee to Euron early and was rewarded with much of House Botley's land. Now, there are a bunch of houses Goodbrother, but none of them seem to be strong Euron supporters. Gerald Goodbrother switched from Victarion to Euron during the Kingsmoot, but was later seen talking quietly to Roderick the Reader on Oakenshield, perhaps regretting his decision. It's somewhat curious that these ships are here, but we don't see their captains inside. The much more important question, though, is where are the other Ironborn? There are again only 36 ships here. There should be 900. Even if we assume that they're spread out among 4 other Ironborn strongholds, that's still only 180 ships. So Aeron sees Euron's flag for the first time and is confused, much like Samwell was. Now, Euron's sigil is kind of curious. So according to Theon, Euron has one eye that's black and shiny. I imagine he gets the nickname Crow's Eye from that, as crows often appear as if they have black, shiny eyes. That said, the sigil doesn't show that. It shows a red eye with a black pupil carried by crows. So it's a crow's eye in the sense that they possess it, but it's more of a bloody eye by itself. And we should remember that Aeron saw Euron with a blood eye in his first Shade of the Evening hallucination. Now we've had a whole bunch of eye imagery so far in our story, with a three-eyed crow, Jojen wanting Bran to open his third eye, a werewood wanting to open Jon's eye, Syria wanting Arya to open her eyes, the warlocks wanting to remove the caul from Dany's eyes, Qyburn wanting Jaime to open his eye, Mel wanting Davos to open his eyes, and Euron wanting Victarion to open his eyes. In all of these situations, opening one's eyes is either a spiritual awakening or a moment of serious personal growth. So the sigil seems to be a statement that Euron believes he has an open eye spiritually. On a completely different note though, the eye also recalls the unblinking, ever-watching evil eye of Sauron from The Lord of the Rings. Beyond them, a host of merchant ships floated on a tranquil turquoise sea. Cogs, carracks, fishing boats, even a great cog, a swollen sow of a ship as big as the Leviathan. Prizes of war, the damp hair knew. Now the Leviathan is a large ship with the Iron Fleet over with Victarion. And speaking of Victarion, Euron's fleet is remarkably similar to Vic's. Euron's fleet has cogs, carracks, fishing boats, and even a great cog, while Victarion's fleet has a lubberly assortment of cogs, great cogs, carracks, and trading galleys, salted here and there with fishing boats. While Euron's fleet has a swollen sow of a ship, Victarion's fleet has the Noble Lady, a tub of a ship as fat and wallowing as the noble ladies of the Greenlands. In fact, Euron's fleet at the Isle of Pigs is nearly the same size as Victarion's over in Slaver's Bay. Aeron counts around 36 ironborn ships at the Isle of Pigs, while Victarion has between 40 and 45 ironborn ships in Slaver's Bay. The rest of the fleets are stolen vessels, which, as we mentioned, are similar. Without a doubt, our author has mirrored these two fleets. And as I mentioned before, Victarion is pondering what Euron would do over in Slaver's Bay and mimicking his actions. Here we find the inverse. Euron is mimicking Victarion and collecting prizes of war. The two fleets are mirrored and the two brothers are mirrored. So let's take a look at what Victarion is doing with his prizes of war. In the Victarion sample chapter, Victarion is filling the Noble Lady and the other merchant ships with soldiers. He wants to approach Meereen with merchant ships to facilitate a surprise attack. So with Euron, we should definitely be looking for some sort of deception with his merchant ships. Euron Crowseye stood upon the deck of Silence, clad in a suit of black scale armor like nothing Aeron had ever seen before. Dark as smoke it was, but Euron wore it as easily as if it were the thinnest silk. The scales were edged in red gold and gleamed and shimmered when they moved. Patterns could be seen within the metal, whorls and glyphs and arcane symbols folded into the steel. Valyrian steel, the Damphair knew. His armor is Valyrian steel. In all the Seven Kingdoms, no man owned a suit of Valyrian steel. Such thing had been known 400 years ago, in the days before the Doom, but even then they would have cost a kingdom. Euron did not lie. He had been to Valyria. No wonder he was mad. So for a third time, our attention is brought to Euron's black-scaled armor, something that makes Euron look like a crow or a dragon. However, this time the armor is Valyrian steel. Now Aeron immediately thinks that this is proof that Euron has been to Valyria. But I fail to see how this armor is any more proof than the Valyrian horn. The Valyrian Empire was very large and Valyrian items could be found anywhere. There's nothing about this armor that proves a trip to Valyria, and Euron's jump to that conclusion makes me highly question the validity of that thought. Not to mention, why is Euron just donning this armor now? Why not wear it during the Kingsmoot to give credence to the claim that he'd been to Valyria? And why not wear it during the battle for the Shield Islands? A lightweight armor that wouldn't drown you would be a godsend in a sea battle. And why not wear it when he was taunting Aeron in the dungeons? That would be pretty demoralizing. Euron only recently donning the armor makes me think that he only recently acquired the armor. And it should be noted that Euron has been raiding one of the richest parts of Westeros, if not the richest. If any Westerosi family could afford a suit of Valyrian armor, it would be the Redwynes. "Your Grace," said Torwald Browntooth, "I have the priests. What do you want done with them?"
"Bind them to the prows," Euron commanded. "My brother on the Silence. Take one for yourself. Let them dice for the others, one to a ship. Let them feel the spray. The kiss of the drowned god, wet and salty." This time, the mutes did not drag him below. Instead, they lashed him to the prow of the Silence. Beside her figurehead, a naked maiden, slim and strong, with outstretched arms and wind-blown hair, but no mouth below her nose. So once again, we get some Christ parallels with Aeron. Euron's captains dice for the priests.
which mirrors soldiers dicing for Jesus' clothes when he was crucified, and Aeron is tied to the prow as if it were a cross. The prow is a bit of a taunt for Aeron. Aeron generally dislikes women, and his failure in accepting Asha as queen really drove this whole mess with Euron in the first place. I suspect this sexism derives in part from religion, and in part from women reminding him of his drunk womanizing days after the death of Yuri. Now, interestingly, Euron mentions the kiss of the drowned god. Our story has come full circle, and we are back at the beginning of the Prophet chapter. When we first met Aeron, he was giving men the kiss of life and bringing them back from the dead. Aeron believes that the sea will restore him, that it will resurrect him. He is looking for the kiss of life. They bound Aeron Damphair tight with strips of leather that would shrink when wet, clad only in his beard and breechclout. The crow's eye spoke a command. A black sail was raised, lines were cast off, and the silence backed away from shore to the slow beat of the oarmaster's drum. Her oars rising and dipping and rising again, churning the water. Above them, the castle was burning, flames licking from the open windows. So we find that Aeron is bound with leather tight that will shrink when wet. It seems he is once again being tortured. I'm not sure if shrinking leather can be deadly, but at minimum, I think our author is saying that Aeron is going to be experiencing a lot of pain. By the way, at some point they gave Aeron his breechclout back. I'm not sure when. So Euron's captains have decided to burn the castle they were in, which seems to match the execution of the lords and ladies. It's quite clear that Euron is not here for conquest or hostage-taking. He's here for destruction. The Isle of Pigs appears to have served its function. It drew the Redwyne and Hightower fleets. The only question that remains is, what now? Now the waters around the Isle of Pigs was described as calm, so Aeron has not yet been struck with any wet spray. Once they get out to sea and the winds pick up, he'll start getting wet and we'll have two things happen. First, Aeron will believe that he's back with the drowned god, and second, the leather will start shrinking. When they were well out to sea, Euron returned to him. "Brother," he said, "you look forlorn. I have a gift for you." He beckoned, and two of his bastard sons dragged the woman forward and bound her to the prow on the other side of the figurehead. Naked as the mouthless maiden, her smooth belly just beginning to swell with the child she was carrying, her cheeks red with tears, she did not struggle as the boys tightened her bonds. Her hair hung down in front of her face, but Aeron knew her all the same. "Folia Flowers," he called. "Have courage, girl. All this will soon be over, and we will feast together in the drowned god's watery halls." The girl raised up her head, but made no answer. She has no tongue to answer with, the Damphair knew. So Folia joins Aeron on the prow, and now the Jesus picture is complete. The bearded, mostly naked Forsaken prophet is bound and slowly dying. He has stigmata on his wrists from the shackles, and on his feet from hitting the stairs. He even has two companions, the figurehead and Folia. Folia is of course tongueless like Euron's mutes and the Septons. I do wonder what Euron's logic was with this. Was he trying to open Folia's eyes as well? Folia also has a baby bump, showing that at least 3 months have passed since the Reaver chapter, and probably at least 2 months since Samwell 5. Aeron has spent a long time being tortured. Now, Aeron's morale seems to have dropped again. He was previously thinking that the sea would magically restore him, but now he seems to be looking forward to death again. He licked his lips and tasted salt. So the salt signals that the winds have likely picked up, and now there is spray on Aeron. On the one hand, the leather is going to start shrinking, but on the other, he has been rejoined with the sea, which he had believed will make him whole. This is of course also a baptism where the water is making Aeron both die and be born again, at least symbolically. And it recalls Bran one last time. If you remember, at the end of A Storm of Swords, Bran was symbolically baptized by the wall when he crossed through the Black Gate. And like Bran, Aeron tastes salt. Both of these instances seem to recall the Azor Ahai prophecy of being born of salt. And so that's the Forsaken chapter, and the big question is, what comes next? Well, in the chapter, Aeron repeatedly asks why he is there, and to a lesser extent why the warlocks and priests are there. We see that Euron destroys what is no longer useful to him, so what exactly is Aeron's function? We certainly aren't clear what the function is exactly, but it's pretty clear that Aeron, the warlocks, and the priests do indeed have a function. We also see an overwhelming number of parallels to Bran, Arya, and Dany. The sensory deprivation, the torture, both mental and physical, and the psychotropic drugs all display this. And when we throw in what the warlocks went through, we also see maiming and cannibalism. The one thing that Bran, Arya, and Dany all have in common is that they're all telepathically gifted. I would say it's safe to assume that Aeron's function is telepathic in nature, and I would surmise that praying, that is, talking with one's mind, is all part of it. But how would Aeron's telepathy help Euron in a battle? Well, I have some ideas, but we have to first look closely at this upcoming conflict. We see three major illusions when it comes to this upcoming battle: Fair Isle, the Battle of Ice, and the Battle of Fire. Just as with Fair Isle, the Ironborn are caught in a strait with forces on both sides. Yet it seems exceedingly unlikely that Euron would fall for this after Victarion's famous defeat. Euron is confident when he shouldn't be. He seems to be up to something which is reminiscent of the victor of Fair Isle, Stannis, up at the Battle of Ice. Let's remember at the Battle of Ice, Stannis also sits and awaits an opponent, and in his possession is a Christ-like Greyjoy. Stannis' forces will likely sit on an island in safety while his opponents approach a lake with holes in it, his secret weapon. And Stannis may also benefit from missing Manderly and Umber ships, as well as missing Manderly and Umber forces. Let's remember that Euron's fleet is supposedly 900, yet we only see 36. On top of the Battle of Ice, Victarion's fleet at the Battle of Fire is also alluded to. Victarion's ploy involves merchant ships that would trick a foe into getting too close. Victarion's plan involves soldiers hidden in holds. We aren't sure what Euron's holds contain, but the Great Sow of a Cog is awfully suspicious. On top of the three battles that are alluded to, we also have a couple mentions of the power of blood, once by Euron and once by Lucas Codd. And I will say that to a seafarer, blood is useful as chum. And Aeron did have a dream of a sea of blood. So what do I think is going to happen? Well, I'm going to go full Preston on this and say that I believe that in parallel to the Battle of Ice and the Battle of Fire, there will be a Battle of Blood. And I believe the structure of the battle will be quite similar to the Battle of Ice. I believe there's a reason why the lords and ladies at the Isle of Pigs were hung up like pigs. Hung pigs allude to a butchering, and a butchering involves the draining of blood. After all, why hang all of the lords and ladies if you're just going to throw them in the ocean later? I believe that Euron has collected the blood of all of his victims during his raids, and I believe those merchant ships, namely that Sow of a Cog, is filled with blood. I believe that Euron is going to chum the water at the Battle of Blood, creating a parallel situation to the Battle of Ice. I believe the Hightower and Redwyne ships will enter the area feeling unthreatened, just as the Freys will walk onto the lake feeling unthreatened. And just as the Freys will plunge through the ice and be brought to the bottom by their armor, I believe Krakens, drawn to the area by the chum, will pull down the Hightower and Redwyne ships. And I believe Krakens being drawn to blood will parallel dragons being drawn to Victarion's holds of pork, which I call Chekhov's bacon. Those that try to escape will be blocked by the missing Greyjoy ships, just as the Freys who try to escape will be blocked by the missing Manderly and Umber forces. Essentially, Euron will Fair Isle the Hightowers and Redwynes when they think they are Fair Isling him. Now, of course, a big question is, how will Euron himself survive Kraken attacks at the Battle of Blood? Stannis has a nice little island to stay on, and this is where I think Aeron will come in. I believe that Aeron's telepathy will act as a sort of sonar pulse. He, the warlocks, and the priests will keep Krakens away from the ships that they're on. Aeron is Euron's island. And so I think that's how Euron is going to win. But of course, even beyond this battle, there's an overwhelming theme in this chapter of Aeron as Jesus. And if Jesus does one thing, it's to resurrect. I'm not sure what this means for Aeron, Kraken control, a telepathic network. It's really hard to say, but we have a fascinating story coming up. And that's it for The Forsaken. My Patreon supporters voted, and they picked the Arianne chapters as the next ones to handle. So I guess I can never get very far from Dorne. So we'll be tackling those chapters next time. See you then.